This is Bonjour Chai, the home base edition. I'm Avi Feingold in Montreal, and I'm here with Phoebe Maltbovi in Toronto. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, we talk about BASE, which is a new organization devoted to creating spaces in neighborhoods with Jewish rabbis that are pluralistic and multi-denominational for young adults to experience Judaism in the comfort of somebody's living room. We also go through the Jewish world and many, many more little items of fun and interest. Phoebe, how's your week been?
It's been a good week. Yeah. How about you, Avi? How's your week been?
A whirlwind. It's not my nachas, but my niece got engaged. So I went off to New Jersey
Mazel tov, as they say.
to go and have to go to the engagement party. It was perfectly timed in theory, where I'd be able to go on Sunday, drive my parents to New Jersey. The drive back was insane because it was a crazy nor'easter coming through Albany and all the way up through the Adirondacks. But we made it home safe, and we are here now to be able to record. It's been a busy week on the real calendar, right? We had Pi Day. Is Pi Day Jewish? I don't know.
I'm not sure. Is March break?
March break,
big thing in
deal.
Toronto is happening. So that's what we've been up to. Even though, so my daughter is doing her school's daycare for some of it. And also we went to the art gallery of Ontario's children's area, which we had somehow never known existed, but a friend of hers from school alerted us to this. And there's a whole section of it downstairs that's all for children to play. And it's really, really wonderful. And I guess this is kind of a little bit of a sense of the pandemic being quasi over, that you have now these huge groups of small children playing together in a museum.
Do they have parallel exhibits for the children that's mirrored from what's above? Is there a Leonard Cohen exhibit for children in the children's section?
That would be incredible, and
terrifying.
I seriously wish there were. And now, no, it's just playing Hallelujah down there while they paint. No. But maybe there should be.
Yeah, it is. It's 3 years coming on the onset of the pandemic.
It certainly is. And that both feels like forever and no time at all, right?
It really does. It feels like both yesterday and a million years ago, when I have distinct memories of some very, very specific stuff that was oh, this is what's happening now because nothing else is happening in the world. And it was the pictures of the no pollution, or, John Krasinski doing his Some Good News. He from The Office, the actor.
No, I know who you mean, yes. But I don't know how to
I think it's Krasinski. He had the Some Good News, and that was supposed to be this really cool, oh, look, you see, there's good news in the world, and I'm doing it in a suit, but I'm also in my boxers, and all of these little distinct, very, very clear moments, and also complete blank on what was happening during the days and during the moments to moments sometimes. For sure.
I mean, I feel very struck by it not having ended as I imagined that there would be this end. Masks would be a thing of the past, and the whole thing would feel just over. And to me, it just seems like this has become incorporated. COVID and responses to COVID have become really just incorporated into life. And they, we're not obviously still in the zone we were in, but I think there is still, as a parent of young children, this kind of, do you have play dates in people's houses? Some people are still, and, for understandable reasons, tentative. I think I don't think there is that returning to the before has happened or could happen, but I think a lot depends on your milieu, right? Which world are you in, I
was hearing these people saying that, the way that, it works, for example, in Japan, where if you're sick, even a little bit, right, you wear a mask and it's not socially unacceptable, and you don't feel like a pariah. You're actually saying, I want to be hanging out with you people. I don't want to get you sick, so I'm going to wear a mask. Whereas here, if you put on a mask, it's oh, they're a crazy person. And there's still this stigma attached to the mask, right? You're COVID orthodox, right? And you're oh yeah, you're one of those
yes.
people. And then if you wear the full mask and you don't go anywhere, you're COVID Haredi. And, like, and we look askance.
Oh, absolutely. But you're right. I think that I think you're totally right to make an analogy to religion, because I think there is, people are making these decisions, and I include myself, I too am a person, on the basis of, sort of rational medical considerations, as well as sort of cultural affinity, as well as just sort of what feels right, like what people around you are doing, all of these things. I think it's really complicated because I don't have any coherent policy about when, beyond like a doctor's office, about when I'm wearing a mask and not. But I was wondering like what because I wrote a little bit about just kind of thinking back on these 3 years and how they've been for the website. But I was just thinking about sort of the Jewish angle on this, namely specifically something that David Sachs, the writer David Sachs, had said in a piece that's in the CJN magazine about sort of more liberal Jews. I don't remember if he said Reform specifically, being sort of the most into masking in the population. And I was just wondering like how it all kind of breaks down, like in terms of taking COVID seriously, because a part of me, and again, this is the sort of secular American New York Jew part of me, thinks, oh yes, definitely super Jewish to take COVID super seriously, to be, thinking about immunocompromised members of the community, all this, always wear a mask and so forth. But then you have other segments of the Jewish community who obviously are not having a sort of...
I can easily see that comment going one of both ways, right? Either he's trying to say, yes, the liberal community is very conscientious and really cares a lot more than many other segments of the population because we are the liberal community that is observant, that cares a lot about their Judaism. They do this and they mask and they care and they're really cautious and want to be, very much the strict letter of the law. And that's one way of reading that. You can easily read that statement as saying, I want to critique the Orthodox for being completely like mask avoidant and completely COVID
I don't think he
avoidant.
meant either. I think he was being I think it was a bit more mocking of the hyper serious about COVID.
Sure. But the flip side of that is mocking the Orthodox community who for years have been, perceived, possibly rightfully so, as completely avoiding the entirety of the pandemic and saying we need to meet, for services, we need to go to yeshiva, we need to do this, we need to go to that to do that. And like, that's just as much potentially mocking and problematic, right? As much as you might have a problem with their masking policy, you got to be careful to keep it to the masking policy and not to the, well, these are people who have nothing to do with society, and this is just yet another example of what happens there. And
I don't know if I'm wondering if it's about having nothing to do with society or more just about sort of left-right divides and the way it all got so politicized, especially in the States. But also, but actually, especially in Canada, I mean, the trucker protests and so forth, that kind of where you stood on COVID became this kind of proxy for... I
was in ground zero of right-wing Judaism over the past few days. Like I spent an afternoon in Teaneck, New Jersey, which is both amazing and terrifying sometimes because you see like bizarre right-wing support for, so many causes that there absolutely shouldn't be, simply because that's what right-wing is equated with right-wing, in certain segments of the population. But then again, you're aware that their society, their living arrangements, the way in which they function is so fundamentally different from so many other ways of living that sometimes you do need to live in an enclave. Sometimes you do need to, have spaces where people, where you make sense to a lot of other people. Or you can walk into a store and it's a Judaica store, and in one place you have the ability to like buy all the things you need, whether they're a little edgy or like super observant, and everybody gets to pick their thing. I walked into a Judaica store. I got to like in one place pick my favorite brand of kippah, which is a thing because now there's like a lot of them and they're harder to find in Canada. I got bananagrams in Hebrew, right, for my kids, which was really funny to see. And I also picked up a whole bunch of books. One of them was called Monologues from the Makom, where you don't even need to explain that to somebody in Teaneck, but I'll explain that to you. Makom is a euphemism that the rabbis use in the Talmud, right, it literally means a place, right? What they used to refer to as that place, and it's often referred to like being used as a euphemism for female genitalia. right? So
that I did not know.
So Monologues from the Makom was a book of first-person essays and poetry and pieces about female sexuality from women. From Orthodox women's
So like the vagina monologues, but...
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So all of this is picked up in one store, right? That's the world that you live in, and sometimes that means that you're separate from everybody else, and sometimes that means that you feel like those rules don't always apply to you. But there are definitely places where one can legitimately critique the Orthodox world, right? Did you see this trailer for this fake TV show called Unseen Housewives? It was like a 3-minute trailer that was teasing this show, but it wasn't really, and it was supposed to be like, Real Housewives style, but it was a bunch of teen girls, and it was there to talk about like forced teen marriage.
Are they Orthodox Jewish teen girls?
This organization that made this video was called Unchained at Last. It was started by somebody who is an ex-Haredi woman who is now, she calls herself like a vehemently atheist or something. And there was a lot of abusive and forced marriages in Haredi Orthodox communities in Brooklyn and in Israel and elsewhere. So she started this organization for that, but has since expanded to include many, many non-Orthodox and non-Jewish forced marriages, and pointing out the plight of what happens when you get married at 14 with your parents' consent because they think that that's important and you're not in a position to really do anything about it.
Does this happen a lot in Canada? Or because I know in the States, there are states where that can happen.
According to the video, it is legal in 43 U.S. states. It's an American thing. Having been somebody who signs marriage licenses all the time as somebody who officiates, I do believe the law is that you can be 16 and get married with parental permission in Quebec. And I'm pretty sure that that's the law most anywhere else. But there are people who will get a religious marriage without having to deal with the legal marriage because they think that that's important. And that it's not common, but it is more common than you would imagine, even if it is still uncommon that there are stories of people that are 14 and 15 that get engaged. And, it's what they're told to do and that's important. And I would say that that's a legitimate critique.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I think the secular world sometimes goes too far in the other direction. And what I don't think it's good to tell women, especially, to that you're only really adult enough to get married or especially have kids until you're, I don't know, in your mid to late 30s, because obviously then it becomes more difficult to have them. And I think a better society might make it a little easier for the women who want to have children, not at 15, but also not at 45 to have
Look, I think you have to remember that if these people are coming from a world where arranged marriage makes perfect sense to them, that is the world where they understand. And again, I'm not justifying it. I'm explaining. And if you have kids that have hormones that are developing, and we might as well channel it into something. And if you're 15 and you can have children, why not get married early and start your life as early as you possibly can? And because in their minds, your real life only starts when you're married almost. And so let's do it early. And I'm not justifying it. I'm just explaining it. I do think that it is fundamentally problematic because it's coming from a world where we never really understood what adolescence was.
That's interesting. I wonder because there have been all these stats about young people having much less sex than they used to. And this was even before COVID. And now with this whole, all of these lockdowns having had who knows what impact, I get the sense that young people are just their reputation is that they're just on their phones these days anyway, and not interacting in person, except perhaps in special environments to encourage them to interact in person, such as perhaps, a Moishe house or something.
Are you moving into our main discussion here?
I'm doing a little teaser.
We have an interview today with Jesse Paikin, who is the new head of base. Have you heard of base before?
First base, second base, third base, or home base.
Oh my God. If that was actually part of their nomenclature, that would be very funny. Oh my God. Can you imagine if that dating nights and they called it getting to second base?
I mean, they would have, now they have to do that.
So BASE is part of this movement of decentralizing decentralizing Jewish communal work. Look, honestly, to be fair and to give credit to Chabad was really the pioneers in this world where they went and said, we don't need these large synagogues, even though they sometimes had large synagogues. We're going to have Chabad houses in different neighborhoods. And we're going to have a couple that's going to live in this Chabad house, and they are going to be around for anybody in the community, and we'll have Shabbat meals in their house, and they will do stuff in their house, and they will, turn their house into a home for the people and become a Chabad house for the world, or the neighborhood to enjoy. The liberal denominations are a little slower to the game, but, I would say one of the major things that shifted in that direction was the rise of Moishe houses. Moishe houses was a movement started relatively recently. We've had Moishe house discussions on the podcast before, but just to recap, it's what happens, right, our former co-host Alana was a resident of Moishe house for quite a while in a variety of places, in Vancouver, in Toronto, there's a Moishe house in Montreal. There are several in Toronto. Moishe house is basically a place where in exchange for getting heavily subsidized rent, you have 4 to 6, maybe 8 even, I don't know how many exactly, young adults between the age of 22 and 32 live there. They get to agree on what type of Judaism they are going to live communally, meaning you can keep unkosher food maybe in the fridge, but you can't cook it because we need the pots to stay the same. Like, everybody gets to do that for themselves. And in exchange for that, they put on about an event a week, right? Several events a month for young adults within their community or in their neighborhoods within the house, right? So the idea is let's communally lead, decentralized, lay-led events for young adults in the community, for people that are 22 to 32. That's sort of like an antidote. It's a post-Hillel life. You graduated from university and you're going on to live in the world, and you still need a community of like-minded people, but you can maybe do this for yourself. So here you go. So this was the Moishe house model. Base emerged out of Hillel, actually, which was similar but a little bit different. And now Base, actually, as we hear in the interview, moved into was bought out or was transferred over to Moishe House as a subsidiary of them. And Base is basically a little bit different, where in exchange for the house and a stipend and et cetera, a rabbinic couple moves into a neighborhood, lives in this house, and turns their house into a space for events and for Shabbat dinners and for classes and stuff like that. So it's more rabbinically led, but still small communities and decentralized away from large institutions and stuff like that.
So is it residential, though, also based?
So the couple lives there.
The couple, but other people
don't.
20,
yeah.
Okay,
so that's the difference between the Moishe house, let's say, and the Base, is that the Moishe house, the events, the young adults are living in this place and are hosting the events themselves and running these events. Sometimes they bring in guests. As a rabbi, I've been a guest lecturer at a Moishe house in Montreal, and I've done other stuff for other Moishe houses. So that's happened. But in the Base model, the only people that are living there are the rabbinic couple, but their home is basically becoming an open space.
I see. And in terms of who's looking for this, because I guess maybe this is just like a sort of micro-generational thing, but to me, I just am wondering how many people, 22, sure, but like closer to the 32 end of things, are looking for having a domestic sphere that isn't you and your partner. You know what I mean? Like, I think it makes sense. I think a lot of this, like you say, has to do with people getting married later and rents being higher.
I also just think that the decentralized model is important. And this will come up in the interview, maybe we can discuss afterwards. But like the idea where Judaism, for a lot of people, doesn't live in these big institutions. They'd rather go to a space where there's only 5 or 10 people that they know and that they like regularly seeing. And that's sort of a micro community. Makes a lot more sense to people now. And that's probably the model that existed for much of Jewish history, with the exception of a couple hundred years when you have these large institutions, right, starting in Western Europe and moving into, North America. You often had micro communities, you had smaller communities, and that decentralization has a lot of advantages to it. Is this the
15-minute city conversation a little
Perhaps,
bit?
Perhaps, we should talk about that's become, the 15-minute city in Jewish. That's a Toronto thing.
Yeah, I wonder, it's not just Toronto, but I was going to say, I think this might be like a Jewish, like what you're talking about, the decentralization is very much that.
So the same way that you have independent coffee shops, instead of Starbucks and instead of grocery stores, you have smaller, independent ones. Why shouldn't we have that for a Jewish model as well? Right. And that's where the model is going towards.
Sure.
Let's hear that interview with Jesse Paikin right after we hear from our sponsor.
During World War II, the Nazis began a little-known program of extermination for their own children. In Peter Klenott's new mystery thriller, The Unwanted, 14-year-old Hannah Ziegler is being driven by her grandfather and her psychiatrist to a euthanasia center. 16-year-old Silke Hartenstein graces the cover of Nazi propaganda magazines. Avi Kreisler is a Munich police detective rounded up for Dachau. And a patrician father hopes his son David McAuliffe will be elected the first Catholic president of the United States. In The Unwanted, in the aftermath of war, revenge brings these four people together in ways unimaginable. The Unwanted. Do not skip to the last page. Find it at Amazon and Barnes & Noble.
One of the more promising areas of Judaism today is the rise of a more decentralized form of Jewish life. Whether one wants to attribute this to the Chabad houses is up for debate, but what is certain is that independent minyanim, smaller non-denominational rabbinical schools, and Moshe houses are a growing trend and a force to be reckoned with. One of these new phenomenon is the Base movement. Originally started by Hillel and now under the Moshe House umbrella, Base seeks to place rabbinic couples in neighborhoods with the intention of making their homes the center of a new Jewish renaissance there. Rabbi Jesse Paikin is the new executive director of Base. He is a native of Thornhill, and he joins us today. Jesse, welcome to Bonjour Chai.
Thanks so much. It's wonderful to be with you.
So you've been involved in emerging networks and independent Jewish living for a while now. You've studied at an independent yeshiva. You were part of this Jewish Emergent Network, which in and of itself is a collection of these various organizations. What drew you to this type of Judaism?
It's a great starting question. There's all of this jargon terminology like emergent and innovative and independent and decentralized. And like to an extent, all of that is true, right? Like those are good terms that we can use sociologically, philosophically, psychologically to describe what's happening right now. But I guess in a different sense, none of this is new, right? The idea of inviting people into a deep, close relationship with a spiritual mentor who could be a rabbi, who could be a rabbinic partner, a teacher who's not up at the front of a lecture hall, but is in amongst you, a mashpia, a spiritual influencer who's deeply interested in your personal growth. None of these are new ideas. They're very ancient ideas. So sure, it's decentralized, or another way of looking at it is we've just kind of shifted the focus of gravity away from, or the center of the circle away from a legacy institution to somewhere else, right? The center of our focus is just in a different place. So yes, it's exciting and it's new and it's innovative and it's vibrant and people are very excited about being a part of this. And obviously there's a lot of success, but the center is still there. It's just in a different place. Why am I excited by this? I had really the benefit, and I'm deeply grateful for this, for growing up in a Jewish environment that was not bound by the walls of legacy institutions or movements. I moved in and out of the entire spectrum of Jewish religiosity and observance, was introduced to and had the ability to contribute in many different spaces. And what I learned on the other end of that is it can be lonely and confusing, but in the end, I think it's all the more rich because you have access to a Judaism that is not owned or held just by a capital M movement, which, by the way, was invented in Germany in the 18th century. And that Judaism at its best is accessible to everyone, is not owned or gate-kept by an institution or a specific kind of rabbi, but that we can get closer to really the ikar, the core of our tradition. And that's why I think that, it's funny to call us decentralized. I feel like my Judaism and the Judaism that's happening at Base is very centralized, but the ikar, the core of it, is just in a different place.
Yes, so it's actually you answered one of my questions before I even got to ask it about, the fact that legacy institutions, for lack of a better term, large institutional Judaism is actually more the anomaly than the norm historically. And we're probably going back to where Judaism always was. And I can get into, what the differences were then versus now. But so that in and of itself, I think, is fascinating to see that we are moving in that direction, that it's exciting, and that people are finding different ways to connect. Why do you think now is the time? Again, so if we can jump ahead or move around a bit. Why do you think now is that specific time for why people are gravitating towards this as a movement, for lack of a better term?
Yeah. I should say, even before answering the question, that I'm interested in the vibrant success of synagogues also. My wife is a congregational rabbi who does amazing
Me
work.
too.
And I'm not interested in the downfall of synagogues or legacy institutions in any way. I think the more people who are
I'm on the fence between you and me, but
look, I think we're clearly in a moment. I was thinking about an experience that I had. I was at an Indigo in Montreal, and I was just walking around the store. And of course, if you've been in an Indigo lately, the book section is actually the smaller section.
There's no more books.
And I was walking through the kind of like the household goods section, and I saw something called the Cosmic Box. And it had like a palm reading kit in it, and some tarot cards and incense, and a whole guide to understanding the nature of the cosmos. And, on the one hand, you might think that this is just it's just a toy, and it's just something for people to kind of put, in their home because they like the aesthetic of it. But I also think it's a symbol, and there's a reason I haven't been able to get this image out of my head. I think it's a symbol that, people in their 20s and 30s and even in their 40s are looking for a sense of purpose and relevance and meaning in their lives. And listen, the data is very clear on this for all sorts of reasons. Legacy institutions, and particularly synagogues, are not tapping into that need and that demand. So it's unsurprising that you would see a generation of people looking to alternative sources like the Cosmic Box. The other example that I find deeply troubling is coming out of Soul Cycle right now. The fitness center, Soul Cycle. Mm-hmm. Soul Cycle is right now launching a new institution called, wait for it, Peoplehood, which I thought was a Jewish term until I learned that Soul Cycle was also doing it. And what it is a group of people sitting in a circle with a guide answering the deepest questions of meaning in life. So it sounds familiar to anyone, right?
It's fascinating to me because in that case, I'm not even sure. I'm really cynical about that in the sense that
me too.
What happened with Soul Cycle is that they did this movement, and this guy who you probably know and I've met a few times, Casper Terculi, who does work in ritual and wrote a book called The Power of Ritual, takes Soul Cycle and shows it as example number one of people want spirituality. They just want it other places. Look at Soul Cycle. And Soul Cycle is saying to themselves, hey, you know what? Let's actually capitalize on the thing that other people identified, and let's lean into that.
So Casper is a great example because I admire his work. He's spoken at the shul where I used to work in DC, and I think he's clearly tapped into and understands very deeply this moment. Casper's launching a new initiative that is small spiritual gatherings of people who are in relationship with each other with a mentor to tap in, and it's explicitly spiritual. It's labeled as spiritual. You can go to the website and learn about how they define spirituality. But who is the number one influencer on that website, the number one inspiration for the work that they're doing? It's Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel. And so they're explicitly taking from our Masorah, from our tradition. I think that Heschel would agree that his message was not exclusively for Jews. But when a secularized version of spirituality is being commodified and sold using the wisdom from our tradition, it pains me and it hurts me because I feel a deep sense of ownership for this tradition. And it's happening because we're not doing it, right? Like, we're not responding to that need. If a website can pitch Heschel to the secular spiritual seekers and we're struggling with that, boy, do we need to be doing some more work. And that's where I think Base is succeeding, largely because when people describe the rabbi that they're looking for, when people in their 20s and 30s describe the kind of rabbi they're looking for, they want deep knowledge, they want kindness, and they want an acceptance and understanding of the life that they're living, both Jewishly and their wider identity. And if we're not doing those things, it shouldn't be a surprise that people are looking elsewhere. But the rabbis who are committed to Base's vision and the spiritual goals that we're trying to reach are deeply knowledgeable, are kind and hospitable, and are looking to accept and understand people for who they are, and then we can connect them to that tradition.
So for people who have never heard of Base until this morning or this afternoon, whenever it is you're listening, tell us what Base does, but more importantly, if you can focus on what makes Base unique, right? What differentiates Base from a Moishe house? What differentiates Base from a Chabad house that is doing a very similar model?
Yeah. So Base is a movement of pluralistic Jewish homes offering spiritual learning and rabbinic mentorship for those in their 20s and 30s. And Base is a project of Moshe House, Moshe House. We're housed under Moshe House, which is the largest organization serving the post-university Jewish crowd globally. The first question is easy to answer. The difference between Base and Moshe House is that bases center around a rabbinic couple. So one of the partners is a rabbi, and the other partner is core to the work, but they might have a separate full-time job. Moishe houses don't have that built in into the home itself. In Moishe House, it's really peer-led, and it's the young adults living in the home and leading the community themselves. On the base model, it's the rabbinic couple inviting people into their home, but everybody else goes back to wherever they happen to live. What makes it unique? Again, like I alluded to this at the beginning, the idea of inviting people into your home for Shabbos or for the Chagim, or for sitting in a learning circle with each other, or for responding to crises and life cycle events in your life is not new, right? Like that's not unique. And I don't think anybody's pretending that like, oh, we've come up with this brand new, radical new idea. I think what is different is the way that we recruit rabbis. It's explicitly pluralistic. We have rabbis from across the denominational and non-denominational spectrum leading this movement. And it's explicitly accepting and understanding towards everybody who comes into the home. Really, the answer is always to say, how can we say yes to as much as we can? I was just in Miami. We had a retreat with the rabbinic leadership from across the states. And I was hosted in the home of our rabbinic couple there. And they said, like, our goal is to never, ever tell someone when it's time to leave the house. That when you come in and you're here with us and we want to be here alongside you.
Well, at some point, right, you have to wash the dishes and you have to go to bed.
You would have to ask them, but I think they meant it. I really did. Like I looked into their eyes when they were saying this. And I think that's what the different model is right now is, look, we know that rabbis who are graduating from the rabbinical schools are also looking for this kind of work. So that's a shift right here is that there's a shifting landscape away from congregational work. And many early career rabbis are looking for this more independent platform to serve as spiritual leaders. But they don't want to be alone. They still want to be in relationship with other rabbis who are doing this work, just not in that traditional model. And when you see how deeply committed they are to this idea of I want to be able to hold our tradition and the wisdom of it and the ability to be with people at a time when they are spiritually seeking, but get rid of the other walls that are in the way, right? This isn't anything goes. It's not a free-for-all. It's clearly deep commitment to very serious, deep Jewish learning and counseling and spiritual guidance, but without the boundaries that have existed elsewhere.
Why do you think, broadly speaking, and there are Moishe houses in Canada, and there's not yet a base, but why do you think that, broadly speaking, this whole movement towards decentralization and towards what you call the emergent network or whatever it is hasn't really made inroads in Canada yet?
Yeah, this is such a great question.
The simple answer is because nobody's actually contacted me about opening up a base.
Yeah, sure. Look, if I can be a rabbi for a moment and think about this kind of rabbinically, when you read the Gemara, when you read the Talmud, there is basically an extended, unresolved debate through the entire Talmud as to what is the purpose of Jewish learning and life. One answer is it's to conserve what has come before. And the other answer is it's to innovate and to create newness, right? So and they're represented really beautifully with like the metaphor of water, right? That one model is that you should be like a reservoir, and the other model is that you should be an overflowing spring. And it's unresolved. There's actually no definitive answer. The machloket, the debate goes back and forth through the entire Talmud. And I think that those are great metaphors for Canada and the United States. That Canada is really good at the reservoir model. I benefited from a robust supplementary Jewish education at my shul growing up, 3 days a week on Shabbos with really good Hebrew education, And look, the data is clearly there whenever people look at Canada. Yes, things are shifting, but the higher rates of education from K to 12 all the way up through adult education are clearly there. The community is more deeply Zionist. People have a much stronger attention to their Jewish identity, even if it's ethnic, cultural, religious, however it is, right? So Canada's really good at the reservoir model, at the kind of conservative model. And the United States, I think, largely based on broader American identity of being an upstart, rebellious, innovative country, is much more adept at the overflowing spring, the Mayan Hamid Gaber approach to Judaism, which is why you see the Chavurah movement here, the independent Minyanim movement, the Jewish Emergent Network, all of these independent spiritual communities. The secret is, and I think here's where the learning from the Talmud comes, it's not either or, right? Like, it's not. There's one principle, though, that I think that is universal, and that's you have to know why you're doing this work. If you can't answer the question, what's the purpose of this? Why am I doing this? What is the transcendent sense of mission that I have? What's my vision of what it means to be Jewish and why people should care about being Jewish and why they should find relevance and purpose in their Judaism versus any of the other myriad sources of meaning, purpose, and relevance.
Et cetera,
right.
Yeah.
People go to Soul Cycle because it provides them purpose, relevance, and meaning. And if all we're doing in the Jewish world is engaged in the meaning game and saying, I want people to have a meaningful experience, that's fine. But guess what? Guess who you're up against right now, right? Because there's a lot out there that's also meaningful and fun. And that you have to be able to answer, but why? Why are you here in this moment? For me, it's why I derive great inspiration from Hasidism and Neo-Hasidism, because that was the whole point of that, was to say, why are you doing this? What's this all about? Why should you care about this? And what's happening outside of just you as an individual, outside of your own sense of satisfaction or enjoyment in this moment, both of which are good. You should be satisfied and enjoy your Judaism. But why are you doing this rather than something else? That's a question that we haven't been good at answering, largely because Judaism is a large ship that coasts along, and it takes a long time to turn that boat around. And for a while, we didn't have to answer that question. We knew the answer. Because I want to go to shul and I want my kids to have a bar bat mitzvah. It's not going to cut it anymore. We have to be able to answer the question, and we have to help other people understand why that question is worth asking. If you can do that, you will find a degree of success. So
if I can rephrase it based on the metaphor you just used, to the people that are looking for that change, you have to recognize that the boat is turning, but it's a big boat and it takes time.
It's a big boat.
And to the legacy institutions that are the boat, the message is the boat is turning whether you want it to stay straight or not. I really do want to say, like, there are some upstart communities that want to capsize the boat and would be thrilled to, like, let's burn the whole thing down and start new. I'm not interested in doing that. I think the boat is a great place to be, and we just want to chart the right course and be together on that journey with each other. And I think the model clearly exists right now. Like Moshe House and Base are a really great model of partnering with legacy and heritage institutions and working with synagogues and in a non-competitive atmosphere to say, how can we work together about this thing that we all care very, very deeply about and that we want each other to succeed at this. Excellent. I couldn't have said it better myself. Jesse Paikin, thanks for coming on to Bonjour Chai. You are welcome back anytime.
Are you in the market for a new watch or a special piece of jewelry? Are you looking for the perfect engagement ring to pop the question? Atelier Lou has all this and more. Eric and the team at Atelier Lou can craft a piece for you, or you can select from some of the exclusive designers that they offer. From a simple bangle to a statement necklace, Atelier Lou can make you or your loved ones sparkle. Located in the heart of Westmount in Montreal or online at atelierlou.com, visit Atelier Lou for your next watch or jewelry purchase. And when you do, make sure to use promo code BON18 for 10% off your next purchase. That's atelierlou.com.
And now it's time to the show for our nachas. Phoebe, what's your nachas this week?
Well, I've got a couple. One is that I spoke to a Hadassah chapter on Zoom, which I had never done before, and that was a lot of fun. So if you have a Hadassah chapter and want me to speak with you on Zoom, I might be able to do that.
I have a sister named Hadassah.
Can I speak to your sister on Zoom?
If she wanted to.
I don't know. That I cannot tell you.
We've always joked about that in the house. How, like, oh, there's a Hadassah chapter. Like, yeah, she's right there. Yeah. All right.
And yeah, my other, I don't know if it's nachas, it might be anti-nachas, because it's sort of, it's that there's a New York Times feature, like an interactive feature about, by the journalist Jessica Gross, about elder millennials or middle-aged millennials. So millennials, as we all know, are the young people who waste all their money on avocado toast. Well, now millennials are entering their 40s, some millennials. I'm not there yet, but it's coming. And what I loved about this feature, which I have not read that closely, was really the illustration that went with it, the art that went with it, which is this, and it was shared all over social media. I've been seeing it constantly, is this cross-section of a rotten avocado, like an avocado that's gone all brown and sad. And I thought this was just so beautiful and brilliant and upsetting, but hilarious at the same time, because you have to have this, right? Millennials are associated with avocados because, for those who are not up on this, there was some people were often saying, and there was one commentator specifically who said it, that millennials can't afford houses because they waste all their money going out and buying avocado toast at brunch and spending a lot of money on avocado toast. And this became kind of a meme, and people would talk about this a lot because obviously whatever an avocado toast costs, the cost of living, of rent and so forth, is going to be, making a lot more of a dent than an avocado toast. So this got a lot of pushback. Anyway, so millennials, this generation, became very associated with avocados. So the idea that as we age, we become rotten avocados, I just found extremely funny.
Yes, something is rotten in the state of avocado.
Certainly. So Avi, what's your nachas this week?
Oh, I have so much nachas. My niece got engaged. I had an amazing bowl of ramen, kosher ramen in Teaneck.
Okay.
With
can we please pause on this? I want to hear about the kosher ramen.
This is not my nachas, but it was like there's a place called Narutable in Teaneck. He's a friend of mine. I've been a fan of his ever since I walked into a restaurant in the Upper West Side in Manhattan called Mike's Bistro, where he was the sous chef, and found out that I was from Chicago. Asked me if I knew about Romanian salamis, which is like the butcher shop that makes some of the best salamis in America. And I was like, yeah, sure. Next time I'm in New York, I'll bring you some Romanian salami. And I ended up bringing him a case of Romanian salami. I mean, like a dozen big ones with like the karnatzel and the beer sticks, everything's loaded up. And we've been friends ever since. I think he comped me an 8-course tasting menu for 2 that night. I just paid the bottle of wine. That was an amazing night, and we stayed friends. He had a restaurant in Teaneck, New Jersey. He then opened up sort of a more fast casual but still higher end ramen place called Narutable in Teaneck. So shout out to Josh Masson for that. And so I got a bowl of ramen with like duck schmaltz matzo balls in there, in addition to all the other ramen-esque things, a soft-boiled egg and fresh veggies, and really, really, truly unbelievable ramen bowl that I had there. But you can do that in a community like New Jersey. Community like Teaneck, New Jersey. So, but that is not my nachas, and neither is my niece's. I really, really was moved by there are these articles that are catnip for people that are former graduate students or really like students of a certain, specific form of study that end up being not quite academic articles, but deeper than what a casual observer might read. You know what I'm talking about, those articles? I don't know where you get those articles for yourself. But for myself, I find them on Lehrhaus often, which is a site devoted to studies like that, sometimes other sorts of stuff. And in this week, there was an article in the Lehrhaus.com is entitled Reclaiming the Musical Past, Leon Modena and Salomon Rossi in Context by Rebecca Sipes. She's a musicologist. She's friends of mine, but she wrote this article about a cappella music in the 1600s and into the late 1600s into the 1700s, mainly by Leon Modena and Salomon Rossi, who, if you heard him and didn't hear the language, you would imagine would be very early classical polyphonic singing, but was doing synagogue music and is still performed to this day. It does not sound like Jewish music, and she gets into a lot of really interesting issues. Even though I'd known about Salomon Rossi, I've sung his music, I've heard his music a lot, I own some of it on CD, but really, really fabulous, really interesting interesting, diving deep into it only the way only great musicology can and leaving you interested with it. So I highly recommend the Lehrhaus article by Rebecca Sipis on Salomon Rossi.
That sounds great, as does the music itself.
Phoebe, wonderful episode as always.
Thank you so much, Avi. This has been so much fun.
Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending March 18th, Shabbat Parashat Vayakel Pekudei. Our show is produced and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer for CJN Podcast is Michael Freeman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. It is always one of the best ways that we get new listeners. As always, you can email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca. I'm Avi Feingold.
And I'm Phoebe Maltz-Bovey.